My name is Jake Lucas, 41 years old. I'm not telling this story to complain or to gain sympathy. I'm telling it because there are lessons in life that you can only learn after losing something you once thought was impossible to lose. I used to believe that if a woman could betray me, then at the very least, my best friend, Eric, never would. We grew up together, back when we still wore shorts and played soccer in the schoolyard. We used to fight over sandwiches, and we also once leaned on each other's shoulders during nights when life crushed us so hard it felt like we couldn't breathe. And yet it was him, the very man who once held my hand in front of my parents' altar and swore, "I'd die for you," who slowly, quietly, and step by step, took away the woman I loved with everything I had. Her name was Hannah, the woman I spent 7 years of my life loving, sacrificing for, dreaming of a home with. A home where she made breakfast, where children's laughter echoed, where I would wipe away her tears every time life became too much. Until one night, no thunder, no warning signs, just a message. One very short sentence. No punctuation, no emojis, no apology. "We need to talk. I think we should stop." Me and Eric. We didn't mean to, but. I don't remember when I dropped the phone. I don't remember how long I sat there. I only remember one thing. My best friend, and the woman I loved the most in this world, betrayed me. At the same time. I met Eric when I was 10 years old, in a rundown rental neighborhood on the western outskirts of the city. Back then, my family had just sold off all our land to pay off debt. My mother worked as a part-time housemaid, and I was a child learning how to grow up, surrounded by shouting, the sound of dishes crashing, and hot, power-out nights that could drive anyone insane. Eric was the only kid in the neighborhood who played with me without asking, "Where's your dad? Why are you so poor?" Or, "Why do you always wear the same shirt?" He didn't pity me. He wasn't curious. He simply showed up, handed me a ball made of old cloth, and kicked it around with me. Like two regular boys. That's how we grew up. No expectations, no explanations, just being there for each other was enough to fight off everything terrible around us. I remember how we used to skip school to wander around the empty lots, argued loudly over a piece of bread, and then laughed hysterically after a miskicked ball sent us both tumbling to the ground. When I was 19, my father died of a stroke in a cramped rented room. Eric was the one who ran out to buy the coffin. He printed the photo for the altar. We took the university entrance exams together. I got into architecture. He studied business administration. We shared a tiny room with a bunk bed and a weak desk fan. We took turns cooking instant noodles, split cheap pork roll sandwiches. On nights when rain soaked our blankets, Eric quietly dried them so I could sleep. Little things. But even then I thought, if there's someone I trust more than myself, it's him. After college, I got a job at a big design firm. Worked from dawn till midnight, saving every penny to open a small studio. When the chance came, I called Eric. No interview, no probation, just one sentence. "I need you by my side." Eric handled partners, contracts, and finances. I took care of design, concepts, and project supervision. We ran the company like two halves of one body. He never asked what time I worked, and I never asked where he went on weekends. Trust was everything. Many nights, drained from meetings, we sat on the rooftop with canned beer, talking about the dreams we once had as kids. We rose from nothing. No one helped us. No one gave us anything. And now we made it. We've got to hold on to this to the end. And I believed, naively believed, that a friendship that had survived poverty, death, and the chaos of building a business would never betray me. But I forgot one thing. The deepest knife wound doesn't come from a stranger. It comes from the hand that once held you through your darkest nights. I met Hannah at an art exhibition Eric dragged me to just to unwind. At the time, I had just wrapped up a major project, was completely burned out, and had zero interest in art. But then, in a room full of grey tones and paintings I couldn't begin to understand, she appeared. She wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads twice, but something in her eyes made me stop. There was depth, quiet, and a subtle sadness I recognized instantly. Because I had carried it once, too. I made the first move. Hannah spoke with a soft, calm voice, no pretense, a smart woman who didn't need to prove her intelligence with fancy words. We talked the whole evening, and continued with short but meaningful dates after that. 3 years later, I proposed. A simple silver ring, a rooftop evening at the studio, strings of yellow lights swaying above us like in one of those old movies. Hannah nodded, teary-eyed, and I thought, I've found the one I'll walk through life with. Eric was the first person I told. He jumped up, punched me in the shoulder like he always did, laughing. Finally found someone who can stand your grumpy face, huh? That night, we drank until late. Eric toasted, poured the drinks, sang. I was so drunk I didn't even know who helped me into bed. But the next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling, as if something in the air had shifted. After that, I started bringing Hannah to the studio more often. She took an interest in my work, helped tweak presentation slides, offered feedback on ideas. She and Eric got along well. Sometimes, when I was busy, Hannah would stay and have lunch with him. At first, I felt at peace, the two people I trusted most in this world, spending time together, understanding each other, getting along. What could be better? But then, small things started to gnaw at that trust. One time I came home earlier than expected. As I walked into the office, I saw Hannah standing very close to Eric. Too close. She laughed at something he said, her hand lightly resting on his shoulder, unconsciously. When she saw me, she startled and stepped back. Eric just chuckled. "You're back early." Just telling Hannah about the Taiwan client. I nodded and said nothing, but from that moment, a tiny fracture formed in my heart. Nearly invisible, but it started to spread. Another time, I forgot my phone at home. When I returned to get it, I saw Eric stepping out of our apartment. Hannah said, "He just dropped off some documents for you to sign." I looked into her eyes. Calm, steady. But something was missing, maybe the lightness. I started being cautious. But I also reassured myself. They're friends. I'm just paranoid from stress. Then one night, I pretended to forget my keys and returned home late. The apartment was dark, but I could hear soft whispers from the living room. I walked in and saw Hannah sitting there, her head resting gently on Eric's shoulder. No kissing, no embracing, but some distances, once crossed, make any excuse meaningless. They both jumped when they saw me. Neither spoke. I smiled. It's late. I'm home. That night, I didn't sleep. Something inside me had died, but I still had no proof. Only intuition, and a growing feeling that a betrayal was quietly blooming right in the place I once thought was safest. I didn't confront them that night. I didn't ask why, didn't scream, didn't break things. Maybe because, deep down, a part of me had already died, even before the truth was confirmed. But that numbness didn't last long. A week later, Hannah sat across from me at the cafe, where we once celebrated our first anniversary. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just said one thing. Eric and I, we didn't mean for it to happen, but feelings, you can't control them. I laughed because I couldn't believe I once thought she was the kindest woman I had ever met. So when did those feelings begin?
I asked. Hannah stayed silent, her eyes avoiding mine. Was it the day I introduced you to? Or the night I fell asleep on the couch while you were in the kitchen laughing with him? She trembled. But she still didn't answer. After that conversation, Eric disappeared from the office. No goodbye. No explanation. He sent his resignation through the assistant, cold and clinical, as if we hadn't spent over a decade calling each other brothers. I cleared out his desk. Every item he left behind felt like a slap to the trust I had once placed in him. I went home and looked around the room where Hannah had once hung the paintings we chose together. Empty. Cold. No one was there anymore. Just me. And a truth I could no longer deny. I had lost the woman I loved and the man I trusted most at the same time. I had lived with honesty, but they chose secrets, betrayal, and then dared to defend it with 2 words: just feelings. The days that followed were a spiral of collapse. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My mind spun with 100 questions and not a single answer. I wasn't angry that Hannah had fallen for someone else. I was angry that she chose the one person closest to me. I was angry that Eric hadn't just taken the woman I loved. He had stolen the last thing I still believed in: friendship. After Eric vanished from the company and Hannah moved out of the apartment, it took me nearly a month to hit rock bottom. No eating, no sleeping, no working. I was like a walking corpse, the shell of a man who once had everything, now reduced to ashes. But one morning, staring into the mirror in the company restroom, I was jolted awake. That hollow face wasn't mine. The man in the mirror wasn't Jake Lucas. I wasn't born to collapse from a stab in the back. From that moment on, I stopped sulking. I didn't go looking for apologies. I didn't need explanations. What I needed was balance, and I would reclaim it, not with screams, but with strategy. I started quietly gathering information. Eric thought I didn't know about the side project he was planning with a few of our old clients, contacts he had only thanks to me. But I knew. He hadn't covered his tracks well. In an old folder he left on the system, I found a financial model layout for a new company, the same name as a startup one of our partners casually mentioned just days ago. And Hannah? She had once used the company email to submit personal portfolios to art exhibitions, the same ones I had sponsored. I found them and made a few small adjustments to the files, just enough to get them rejected for inconsistent artistic direction. She didn't suspect anything, thinking it was just shifting trends. I reached out to a few of the clients Eric used to work with, not to poach them, just to share a few harmless stories about someone who had used the company's name to build secret plans behind my back. Some were skeptical, some said nothing, but I planted enough seeds of doubt. I hired a quiet PR team to completely revamp the company's image, restructured the internal team, gave new opportunities to my loyal colleagues, launched a fresh wave of innovation, and erased every trace Eric had ever left behind. No one knew. No one saw. I didn't go online to rant. I didn't post sad quotes. I just smiled, showed up on time, and day by day, peeled away the masks of the 2 people I had once loved the most. 6 months later, I heard Eric had failed to secure funding. The connections he'd counted on suddenly changed their minds. Hannah withdrew from a major exhibition after facing allegations of image rights violations, a case that I accidentally tipped off to an art news outlet. I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to remove my hand from the throat they had once breathed through. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt balanced. No one has the right to take from me without consequence. Not because I'm vengeful, but because I was far too soft in the past. And that lesson I carved into my heart. Forgiveness is a choice of the soul, but the mind must always know when to draw the blade. That December, it rained nearly the entire week. Saigon was strangely cold. I stood on the balcony of the studio, watching heavy raindrops slam onto the metal roof. Below, the streets were hazy, people rushed by. I took a sip of black coffee, my hand slightly trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of a journey nearing its end. I had just signed a partnership deal with a major international firm, something I once thought was a pipe dream 10 years ago. But now that dream sat stamped in red on the desk in front of me. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and felt silence echo in my chest. Not emptiness, but a kind of peace I had never known before. A week later, I ran into Eric again, not at a meeting, not at one of our old cafes, but at the airport. I had just checked in for a business flight when I saw him walking out of security, pulling a small suitcase, looking thinner, darker under the eyes, but still carrying that trace of pride. He saw me, paused for a few seconds, then walked up, no smile. "Jake." "Yeah. It's been a while." I nodded. No joy, no anger, just calm. "I heard you're doing well," he said, not looking me in the eye. "Everyone has their own path." I replied. "I chose not to go back to the place I was pushed down." Eric went quiet. No apology, no excuse. Maybe he thought he didn't owe me one. Or maybe he knew some things can't be fixed, like a shattered mirror. Even if mended, the cracks remain forever. Just before he turned away, I said, "Thank you. Because of you, I learned those who can't protect something can't truly steal it either." He didn't look back, just walked faster with his suitcase. That night, I sat in a hotel room in Tokyo, opened my laptop, and looked through old photos of myself. A younger Jake, someone who trusted too easily, loved too deeply, someone vulnerable, but also someone who lived honestly and fully. I didn't resent that old version of myself. I was grateful to him, because without those wounds, I wouldn't be standing this strong today. I opened my email, typed one final line to Hannah. "Thank you for teaching me this. Love is not blindness, and trust does not mean surrender. I wish you peace." I didn't send it. I just saved it as a draft, because I knew I wasn't writing it for her. I was writing it to finally close the last door in my heart. 2 years later, I bought my dream home, not to prove anything to anyone, but because I wanted a real place to call home. No shadows from the past, no painful memories. I adopted a dog named Echo, a reminder of the past, but now only a distant echo. It no longer hurt when I remembered. I started painting again. Not for work, just painting. Like a child, like I did back when I still dared to dream. I realized when you live too long in logic and planning, you forget you once had a soul. And now, I was finding mine again. One early spring day, I received a handwritten letter, a rarity in this digital age. It was from an old client who had cancelled our deal after Eric left. He wrote, "I realize now I was wrong back then. I only listened to one side. Now I know you held on to your professional integrity, even through deep personal loss. You don't need to prove anything anymore, but I just wanted to say, I respect you." I read it, moved, not because of the compliment, but because truth had finally reached its destination. Maybe late, but never lost. And then, one evening, as the blood-red sun dipped behind the buildings, I sat down and wrote this, not to complain, not to accuse, but to remind myself and you, the one still reading, betrayal can break you, but how you rise, that defines who you are. I no longer seek revenge, nor do I wish for their regret. Because if you keep waiting for remorse from those who hurt you, you've handed them the keys to your happiness all over again. I learned how to stand again, not with hatred, but with strength, with the belief that what was taken never stripped me of my true worth. It only revealed who deserved to stay and who needed to go. And if you're going through something similar, remember, don't let a traitor define your life. Don't turn your heart into a fortress, but don't leave it without a gate either. And above all, live not to get revenge, but to prove that you are stronger than the wound that tried to break you. I am Jake Lucas, a man who was stabbed in the back, a man who lost both love and friendship in a single moment. But I survived. I stood back up. And I became a better man because of the worst things that ever happened to me.